The town of Dustwater had seen better days long ago. Wooden buildings leaned like drunken men against each other wearily. Tumbleweeds rolled down Main Street every afternoon at exactly 3 o'clock. Paint peeled from storefronts that had once been proud and colorful. Windows were cracked or missing entirely from years of neglect. The saloon still stood, but barely did business anymore these days. Most folks had moved on to greener pastures out west. Only the stubborn and the desperate remained in Dustwater now. The desert sun beat down mercilessly on everything without mercy. Dust covered every surface like a burial shroud over the dying town. But something else rolled through town that hot July morning unexpectedly. A cowboy named Jake Morrison rode in on his chestnut mare slowly. His face was weathered from years under the unforgiving desert sun. His eyes were tired, but still held kindness and humanity inside him. He had been traveling for 3 weeks straight through hostile territory alone. He was heading to California to start fresh and leave his past behind. His saddlebags were light, but his heart was even lighter now. He had no idea his life was about to change forever.
Jake stopped at the general store for basic supplies he needed desperately. The owner barely looked at him when he entered through the door. Nobody talked much in Dustwater anymore about anything at all. The town was dying, slowly but surely, like an old wounded dog. Jake bought beans, coffee, hardtack, and some tobacco for the road. He counted out his coins carefully on the dusty wooden counter. Money was tight, and California was still very far away from here. Every penny counted when you were starting over from nothing. He was about to leave with his supplies when he heard it, a weak whimper coming from behind the building somewhere outside. At first, he thought it was just the wind playing tricks. Desert wind could sound like many things out here in the wasteland. But then he heard it again, more desperate and pained this time. Something was suffering back there in the hot alley badly. Jake's boots crunched on the dry dirt as he walked carefully. He walked around to the back alley slowly and with caution. The heat hit him like a wall of fire immediately. What he saw made his blood run cold instantly and completely. A dog lay dying in the narrow shade between 2 buildings. The animal was a Border Collie mix with intelligent features and markings. His black and white fur was matted with dirt and dried blood. His ribs showed through his thin coat like prison bars. Flies buzzed around his face and open wounds constantly, without stopping. Someone had beaten this dog badly and without any mercy whatsoever. Then they had left him here to die alone and completely forgotten. The dog's eyes opened slightly when Jake approached with careful steps. They were brown eyes, deep and intelligent beyond any measure Jake knew. Even in his terrible suffering and pain, the dog didn't growl or snap. He just looked at Jake with a mixture of hope and resignation. It was a look Jake had seen in men's eyes before, the look of someone who had given up completely on living, the look of someone who expected nothing but more cruelty and pain. Jake's heart broke at the sight of this noble creature suffering. He had seen many terrible things during the war years ago, but this somehow felt different in a way he couldn't quite explain. This felt deeply personal to him for some unknown reason.
"Easy there, boy," Jake whispered softly and gently to the animal. His calloused hand reached out slowly toward the injured dog, carefully. The dog flinched instinctively, but didn't try to bite or retreat away. Jake could see old scars covering his body like a detailed map. This wasn't the first time someone had hurt him badly at all. The dog's breathing was shallow and labored, like a broken bellows. His tongue hung out, dry and cracked from severe dehydration clearly. There was no water bowl anywhere nearby in the entire alley. No food scraps or even old bones lying around anywhere. Nothing at all to sustain life here.
Someone had dumped him here to suffer alone in complete silence. Jake felt anger rising in his chest like a roaring fire. He had seen cruelty before in his 32 years of hard life. He had seen men do terrible things to each other during war. But this was different somehow, in a profound way he couldn't explain. This felt like a personal affront to everything decent and good. How could someone do this to a loyal animal? What kind of monster leaves a dog to die like this?
Jake went back to his patient horse quickly but carefully. He grabbed his canteen and a piece of dried jerky from his saddlebag. He returned to the suffering dog with gentle and measured steps. "Here you go, partner," he said quietly and calmly to him. He poured cool water into his cupped hand slowly and carefully. The dog lapped it up desperately like it was liquid gold. Water dripped down his chin, but he didn't stop drinking it all. His throat worked frantically to swallow every precious drop available. Then Jake broke the jerky into small and manageable pieces carefully. The dog ate slowly and carefully, chewing thoroughly despite his weakness, like he couldn't quite believe this was really happening to him now, like he expected Jake to kick him at any moment suddenly. Jake stroked the dog's head gently between his soft ears. "Who did this to you?" he asked the animal softly. The dog just looked at him with those knowing brown eyes. Those brown eyes seemed to hold terrible secrets and painful memories. Secrets that Jake would soon discover whether he wanted to or not. The dog's tail gave one small thump against the ground weakly. It was the first sign of hope Jake had seen.
The store owner appeared at the alley entrance suddenly and unexpectedly. "Don't waste your time, stranger," he called out harshly without sympathy. His voice was cold and dismissive, like harsh winter wind blowing. "That dog belongs to Dutch Maddox." Jake's hand stopped mid-stroke on the dog's head immediately. He knew that name all too well from stories and rumors. Everyone in the West knew that cursed and feared name well. Dutch Maddox was a powerful cattle baron with connections everywhere possible. He owned half the territory around Dustwater, and even beyond that. He was known for his cruelty to both man and beast. Men who crossed him disappeared without a trace into the vast desert. Ranchers who wouldn't sell their land lost their herds mysteriously overnight. And apparently, he treated dogs the same brutal and heartless way. "Dutch threw him out last week," the owner continued callously and coldly. "Said the dog was worthless and couldn't herd cattle right anymore." The owner spat tobacco juice into the dirt with obvious disgust. "Best leave him be, stranger, if you know what's good for you." His warning hung in the air like a threat of violence. Jake stood up slowly from his crouched position beside the dog. He faced the store owner directly with steady and unwavering eyes. "This dog is coming with me," he said firmly and clearly. His voice was calm but carried steel underneath the quiet tone. The owner's eyes widened in surprise and genuine concern for Jake. "You're making a big mistake, mister. Dutch finds out you took his dog." He didn't finish the ominous sentence at all. He just shook his head slowly and walked away muttering warnings. Jake didn't care about the warning or the implied threat at all. He'd faced dangerous men before during the war and survived. He wasn't about to leave this suffering animal behind now, today. Jake carefully lifted the dog in his strong and steady arms. The animal whimpered softly but didn't struggle against him at all. He was too weak to fight back anyway, even if he wanted. Jake carried him to his patient horse waiting nearby in the shade. He wrapped the dog in his bedroll for warmth and protection, carefully. Then he secured him carefully behind the saddle with rope tightly. The dog looked at him with those brown eyes again. This time there was something different in them. Trust, maybe even gratitude. But what Jake didn't know yet was this terrible and dangerous truth. The dog wasn't just any ordinary herding dog at all whatsoever. The dog had witnessed something terrible on Maddox's ranch that night, something that Dutch Maddox wanted buried forever in the desert sand, a murder that could hang him if it was ever proven. And now, by saving this animal's life today in Dustwater, Jake had just painted a bright target on his own back. Dutch Maddox didn't let anything go ever in his entire life, especially not witnesses who could ruin him and destroy everything. The question wasn't if Maddox would come for them both. The question was when he would strike and how many men.
Jake cleaned the brand wound carefully with whiskey from his flask. The dog winced but didn't pull away from his touch at all. "I know it hurts," Jake said softly to the wounded animal, "but we need to keep it clean or infection will set in fast." He tore strips from his spare shirt to use as bandages. He wrapped the wound gently but firmly to protect it properly. The dog licked Jake's hand gratefully when he finished the work. It was a simple gesture, but it meant everything to Jake. Trust was beginning to form between them slowly but surely. Jake fed the dog more water and food throughout the long night. He stayed awake, watching over him like a guardian angel would. The dog slept fitfully, whimpering sometimes in his troubled dreams. Jake wondered what nightmares haunted this poor animal's mind constantly. What had he seen on Maddox's ranch that was so terrible? What secrets did those deep brown eyes hold inside?
Morning came with golden light streaming through the broken roof beautifully. Jake woke to find the dog sitting up finally on his own. His eyes were brighter and more alert than they were yesterday. His tail wagged slightly when he saw Jake beginning to stir. "Well, look at you," Jake said with a genuine smile. "You're a fighter, aren't you, boy?" He gave the dog more food and fresh water to drink. Then he checked the brand wound again very carefully. It looked better already, with no signs of infection developing yet. Jake decided they would rest here another day, at minimum. The dog needed more time to heal properly and regain strength. And Jake needed time to think carefully about what came next. Going to California seemed less important now somehow in his mind. This dog needed him desperately right now. And maybe Jake needed the dog just as much too. That afternoon, Jake heard horses approaching from the distance, clearly. 3 riders came up the path toward the abandoned homestead. Jake's hand moved to his gun instinctively, without thinking. The dog's ears perked up suddenly, and he growled low. It was the first real sound Jake had heard him make. The riders stopped about 20 yards from the house, cautiously. The man in front was big and mean-looking and dangerous. He wore a black hat and had a nasty scar across his cheek. "You Jake Morrison?" the man called out roughly and loudly. Jake stepped outside slowly, but kept his gun hand ready always. "Depends who's asking," he replied calmly but firmly. The man smiled, but it wasn't friendly at all, whatsoever. "Name's Clem. I work for Dutch Maddox." Jake felt his stomach tighten with dread immediately. That was fast, much too fast for comfort. "Mr. Maddox wants his property back," Clem continued in a cold voice. "That dog you took belongs to him legally and officially." Jake's mind raced, but he kept his face completely neutral. "The dog was dying in an alley behind the store," Jake said. "Looked abandoned to me completely, left for dead." Clem's smile disappeared like smoke in the wind instantly. "Don't matter what it looked like to you, stranger. It's branded with Maddox's personal mark. That makes it his property by law. I hand it over peacefully, or we'll take it by force." Jake looked at the 3 men carefully and assessed them. They were all armed and looked experienced in violence. But Jake had been in tight spots before during the war. He knew how to handle himself against odds. "Dog stays with me," Jake said, firmly and clearly. The words hung in the air like a death sentence pronounced. Clem's hand moved toward his gun slowly and deliberately. But then something unexpected happened that changed everything in an instant. The dog limped out of the house behind Jake on shaky legs.
He stood beside Jake's leg, despite his serious injuries and pain. He growled at the three men with surprising strength and determination. Clem's horse suddenly reared back in fear of the dog. "That dog," Clem said, his voice shaking slightly with recognition. "He's the one that was there that night at the ranch." The other two riders exchanged nervous glances between themselves. Jake noticed their fearful reactions with great interest and curiosity. "What night?" Jake asked, pressing his advantage. "What happened?"
Clem realized he had said too much already and cursed himself. His face turned red with anger and embarrassment at his mistake. "Just hand over the dog, Morrison. Last warning I'm giving you." Jake stood his ground firmly, without moving an inch. "Come and take him then," he said quietly, but dangerously. For a long moment, nobody moved at all in the standoff. Tension crackled in the air like lightning before a storm. Hands hovered near guns on both sides. Then Clem spat on the ground in disgust and frustration. "You just made a big mistake, Cowboy," he said venomously. "Maddox doesn't forget what people do to him. He doesn't forgive either, ever. You're a dead man walking now, Morrison." The three riders turned their horses around together. They rode back toward town in a cloud of dust. Jake watched them go until they disappeared completely from sight.
His heart was pounding hard, but his hand was steady. The dog sat down beside him, still watching the horizon carefully. Jake looked down at the animal with new understanding and respect. "What did you see, boy?" he asked quietly and gently. "What are they so afraid you'll tell someone?" Jake knew they couldn't stay here any longer at all. Maddox would send more men, probably tonight, under cover of darkness. Jake packed his gear quickly and efficiently, like a soldier. He made a makeshift sling for the dog from his blankets. The dog was stronger now, but still couldn't walk far distances. Jake secured him on the horse carefully and safely. They rode north toward the mountains in the distance. There was an old mining town there called Silver Creek. Jake had friends there from his prospecting days years ago. They could hide there for a while, safely. Maybe figure out what this was all about eventually.
They rode for hours through rough and dangerous terrain. The sun beat down mercilessly on them both without relief. Jake rationed their water carefully between them to make it last. The dog never complained once, just kept his eyes forward bravely. Around sunset, they stopped at a small stream for rest. Jake let the dog drink first from the cool water. The animal lapped it up gratefully and eagerly. Jake refilled the canteens and washed his dusty face. He noticed the dog staring at something across the stream intently. His ears were flat against his head in warning. His body was tense like a coiled spring ready to strike. "What is it, boy?" Jake asked quietly and carefully. Then he heard it too. In the distance, voices, men talking in low tones nearby. They were being followed by someone dangerous. Jake pulled the dog behind a large boulder, quickly and quietly. He peered around the edge of the large boulder, carefully and quietly. 4 men on horses were searching the entire area methodically and thoroughly. These weren't Clem and his friends from earlier in the day. These were different men, much harder men with cold, dead eyes. Professional killers by the look of them and their expensive weapons. Maddox had sent his best men to finish this job permanently. Jake's blood ran cold when he recognized one of them very clearly. Black Jack Murphy, a notorious hired gun from Texas with a deadly reputation. Murphy had killed at least a dozen men in supposedly fair fights, maybe more in unfair ones that nobody talked about openly, ever. And he was looking for Jake and the dog right now. Murphy's face was scarred and weathered like old cracked leather. His eyes were dead and empty like a shark's soulless eyes. He carried 2 guns on his hips with easy, practiced confidence. This was a man who killed for money without any hesitation, a man who slept well at night, despite the blood. Jake knew they were in very serious trouble now, more trouble than he had ever been in before. Jake made a quick decision in that critical moment of danger. They couldn't outrun these experienced men on horseback with an injured dog, not through this rough terrain in the approaching darkness ahead. They needed to hide somewhere safe and wait for an opportunity. Jake spotted a small cave entrance nearby, half hidden by thick brush. It wasn't much, but it would have to do for now. He led his horse toward it as quietly as possible. The dog followed without making a single sound at all. They slipped inside the dark cave just as the men rode past. Jake held his breath, his hand over the dog's muzzle very gently. The dog understood the danger and remained completely silent and still. The men stopped right outside the cave entrance on their horses. "Lost their trail completely," one man said with clear frustration in his voice. "Too dark to track properly now," another agreed while dismounting his tired horse. "We'll camp here tonight," Murphy's cold voice said with absolute authority. "Resume at first light when we can see the tracks clearly. Maddox wants them found dead or alive, preferably dead and silent forever." The words sent chills down Jake's spine immediately. The men began setting up camp right outside the cave entrance. Jake could hear everything they said and did clearly. They unsaddled their horses and tied them to nearby trees. They gathered wood and started a fire quickly. The smell of smoke drifted into the cave where Jake hid. The dog pressed closer against Jake's leg nervously. Jake kept stroking his head gently to keep him calm. They were trapped now, with nowhere to go at all. 4 professional killers between them and freedom. Jake's mind raced through possible escape plans desperately. Every scenario ended badly in his mental calculations. They would have to wait and hope for a miracle, or create their own miracle, somehow, tonight. Jake and the dog sat trapped inside the dark, cold cave. 4 dangerous killers camped right outside their only hiding place available. Jake could hear them making coffee and cooking food over the fire. He could smell bacon frying and beans heating up. His stomach growled, but he ignored it completely. The dog pressed against Jake's leg in the complete darkness. Jake stroked his head gently and continuously to keep him calm. They would have to wait patiently until the men fell asleep, then try to slip past them somehow without being detected. It was a desperate plan, but the only one available now. Jake checked his gun in the darkness by feel alone. 6 bullets in the cylinder. 4 men outside with multiple guns each. Not good odds at all for survival tonight. The dog seemed to sense Jake's worry and growing concern. He licked Jake's hand again in the dark cave repeatedly. It was a simple gesture, but it meant everything now. They were in this together, no matter what happened next. Whatever came, they would face it as true partners. Jake listened carefully to the men's conversation outside the cave. They talked about other jobs they had done for Maddox. Terrible things they bragged about without shame or remorse. Ranchers they had intimidated and driven off their land. A sheriff they had killed and made look like an accident. A witness who had disappeared into the desert forever. These were evil men who enjoyed their work thoroughly. Jake felt his anger growing with every word they spoke. The dog suddenly tensed beside him in the darkness. His ears perked up and he stared toward the cave entrance. Jake froze and listened intently. Had the men discovered them somehow? But no, the conversation outside continued normally. The dog relaxed again, but kept watching the entrance carefully. He was protecting Jake even in his weakened state. Hours passed slowly in the cave like thick molasses dripping. Jake listened to the men outside talking and laughing occasionally. They were drinking whiskey heavily and playing cards for money. Murphy told detailed stories about men he had killed without remorse. He bragged about how he would kill Jake tomorrow morning. Maddox is paying $500 for the cowboy, Murphy said clearly. Dead only. No witnesses to what the dog saw that night. Jake's ears perked up at that critical information. Finally. So it was confirmed beyond any doubt now at last. The dog had witnessed something terrible on Maddox's ranch, something worth killing over and covering up permanently. Jake looked at the dog in the dim moonlight carefully. "What did you see?" he whispered again, very quietly. The dog just looked at him with those knowing brown eyes. Eyes that held dangerous secrets worth dying for in this territory. Worth killing for without hesitation or mercy from Maddox. And Jake was beginning to realize something very important now. Those secrets might be the only thing keeping them alive. Murphy's voice continued outside with more details that shocked Jake. That night at the ranch, the dog saw everything clearly. He saw Maddox shoot that traveling judge in cold blood, right in the back of the head like a coward. The judge was asking too many questions about missing ranchers. Maddox couldn't risk him finding the bodies buried out back, so he invited him to dinner and shot him. Made it look like the judge never arrived at the ranch. But this dog saw it all happen. Saw where they buried the body too, probably. Jake's heart raced at this revelation. A murdered judge. That was why Maddox wanted the dog dead so badly. That was why he had sent his best killers after them. The dog was a witness to murder. A murder that could hang Maddox if proven true.
Around midnight, the men's voices grew quieter and less frequent. One by one, they fell asleep around the slowly dying fire. Soon, Jake could hear loud snoring from outside the cave entrance. This was their only chance to escape alive tonight. Successfully, Jake slowly stood up, his joints stiff from sitting still. The dog stood beside him immediately, ready to move when needed. Jake led his horse toward the cave entrance very carefully. Every single step had to be silent and measured perfectly. The dog walked beside him without making any sound whatsoever. They reached the cave entrance, and Jake peered out very cautiously. The four men were sleeping soundly around the fire's glowing embers. Their horses were tied to a large tree nearby, peacefully. Jake took a deep breath and stepped out carefully onto the ground. 1 step. 2 steps. 3 steps away from the immediate danger. The dog followed right beside him like a shadow. Then disaster struck, suddenly and unexpectedly. Jake's horse's hoof hit a loose rock on the ground. The sound echoed in the quiet night like a gunshot. Murphy's eyes snapped open instantly like a predator waking. "They're here!" he shouted loudly and reached for his gun. The other men scrambled awake, grabbing their weapons quickly. Jake didn't hesitate for even a second now. He jumped on his horse and kicked hard. The dog leaped up behind him with surprising strength and agility. Bullets whizzed past them in the darkness, dangerously close. Jake rode hard into the night toward the distant mountains. The dog held on tight, his claws digging into the blanket. Behind them, the men were mounting their horses very quickly. "After them!" Murphy's voice roared with absolute fury. More gunshots rang out, but Jake kept riding forward. The mountains were close now, maybe 2 miles away still. If they could reach Silver Creek, they might survive this.
The dog barked once, loud and clear into the dark night. It was a bark of defiance and courage despite everything. A bark that said they wouldn't go down without a fight. Jake smiled despite the extreme danger they faced. "That's right, boy," he said breathlessly while riding. "We're not done yet. Not by a long shot." They rode hard into the darkness together as partners. 2 souls against the entire world and its cruelty. And somewhere behind them, the truth was chasing them relentlessly. A truth that Dutch Maddox would kill to keep buried forever. But Jake Morrison was completely done running from powerful men. Tomorrow, he would make his final stand in Silver Creek. Tomorrow, justice would finally come to Dustwater at last, and the dog's terrible secret
would be revealed to everyone. Jake could see Silver Creek's lights in the distance now. The old mining town sat nestled in the mountains safely. His friend Tom Miller lived there still after all these years. Tom had been a Texas Ranger before retiring last year. He would know what to do about Maddox and Murphy. He would help them bring justice for that murdered judge. The dog barked again, this time with what sounded like hope. They were going to make it after all somehow. They rode through the town gates just as dawn broke. People were starting to wake up and begin their day. Jake found Tom's house and pounded on the door desperately. Tom opened it, his gun drawn, then relaxed when he saw Jake. "Jake Morrison," Tom said with surprise. "What in the hell happened to you?" Jake dismounted and helped the dog down carefully and gently. "Tom, I've got a story you won't believe at all. About Dutch Maddox, a murdered judge, and this brave dog here. And I'm going to need your help to make things right." Tom looked at the dog, then at Jake's serious face. He nodded slowly. "Come inside. Tell me everything from the beginning." As Jake walked inside with the dog beside him, he knew their journey wasn't over yet. But they had survived the night against impossible odds. And now finally, the truth would come out into the light. Dutch Maddox's reign of terror was about to end forever.